This is Ask a Lawyer with Blaine Cluton. I'm joined in studio from an undisclosed location by my friend, Andrew McGuire. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, and just so everybody knows, it's a different studio, not the same studio.
I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. The point of this program is to get you some general information on commonly asked legal questions. It's a good starting point, but it should be by no means your end point. With that being said, Andrew, what are we going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about how to find easement information on a property, and specifically what is easement information. And then the other topic is, are easements on your property a bad thing, a good thing? And I have some examples, and I do want to get into it. But before we jump into anything, have you been to Whitefish, Montana before?
No, I haven't been to Montana in a long time, but I have not been to Whitefish ever.
Okay, because I've always wanted to go, and when I was looking up some information, trying to find some examples, it's a resort town that's in northwest Montana in the Rocky Mountains. I think I've been there, and I think it's awesome. Tell everyone, what is easement information? And I'm not going to answer this one. Please just jump straight into it, because I really have no idea this time, for real.
You don't want me to flip it back and say, what do you think an easement is? Not today.
No, because it's just not today. I'm not into it today. Just tell me what it is.
All right. So, and this is by no means exhaustive, but without using legalese, let me start with some basic ideas on easements. And I know I said I'm not going to use legalese, but it sounds legalese. So easements are non-possessory interests in land of another, entitling the easement holder to limited use of the other's land. And non-possessory is a term to describe any category of rights held by one person to use land that is in possession of another. So the easement does not give the holder a right of possession, but rather a right to use something from the possessory estate of another.
So it just lets me borrow it, right?
Essentially, yes. So the easement holder is a person with a legal right to use the easement, and may include the owner of the land across which that easement passes. And there's a lot of different ways of actually creating easements. The way in which an easement was created will necessarily determine the scope of the easement and the extent of the encumbrance on the underlying real property.
I have an example for that.
Okay, go ahead. Jump in.
I'm not going to get into the details because it's a little emotional, but it's related to the property that I own. Behind us, there's a section that has overhead power lines that the county owns. So nobody can build right behind us, so it's a good thing, right? Because nobody can build directly behind us. The county has overhead power lines. And then the same thing in the front on the street, like the area between the actual road and our fence is also technically county land. And there are underground lines there too. But I can use the land and I can put stuff on it. I'm assuming that's an easement that you're talking about, the typical one, right?
Yeah, so easements provide access to the dominant estate over the servient estate. A utility easement allows for wires, cable, or pipes to be strung over, placed upon, or buried under the servient estate. The grant of an easement should be drawn up and executed with the same formalities as a deed to real estate. So generally speaking, what happens is that easements are existing on the land before you buy the property. Sometimes easements will be added to a piece of property that you already own, in which case you would be negotiating for that easement to be added. But most of the time, easements are a necessary part of whatever property that you're on to allow for services to be provided to the community or the rest of the citizens when you're talking about utilities. Okay. But there's other types of easements. So you can have a driveway easement, you can have a fence line easement. There's a lot of different easements that can exist. And the last thing that I was saying right before I got into some different examples was whatever easement that you do, it just needs to follow the same formalities essentially as a deed to make sure that it's given proper effect.
Got it. Okay. I have a different example that's not typical. Can I talk about it now?
Yes.
It has to do with whitefish.
Okay.
Which is what I was talking about earlier. So there's this family, and I'll post this just like every other podcast. We have the transcript on fair punishment, and I'll put the sources in here back to this Montana land resilience article that I found. So the Western manager of the Montana land resilience, his name's Mark Schultz, and he said there's a new easement, and it's the largest ever completed on Whitefish Lake. And its finalization marks are a rare occasion on a waterfront that's more desirable than ever. So this family has, back in the day, owned a lot of the rights on the land near the lake. And so what they've done is it's the largest easement in history of Whitefish Lake, and it doesn't happen very often. And the whole point of this is the easement allows, I'm quoting John Collins, one of the owners of this land, the easement allows us to manage our timberland to promote forest health and maintain species diversity while providing important habitat for all types of wildlife. So this is, to me, a positive thing that, I mean, depending on how you want to look at things, right? If I'm in the timber industry, maybe not. But as an individual that wants to go to Whitefish Lake and I want to have it protected and I don't want to worry about all the climate change related things that would happen in Montana, like this is a very positive thing where you have a family that owns rights, which it could go the opposite direction, which I don't have an example of that, where you would want to give the rights up to a timber company, right? And say, I'm going to sell my land rights at Whitefish Lake, and it could go the opposite direction and completely demolish White Lake or Whitefish Lake.
I'm not quite sure in this example why they're calling it an easement. It could be just kind of the nomenclature that they use in Montana, but another way of looking at this is we call these land trusts, where a piece of property is put into a trust for the conservation and preservation of that land or that property or whatever it is, to protect the natural resources, the beautification, to make sure that nobody's removing anything from the property or building on the property. And I suppose you could draft an easement in the same way, and perhaps they're doing it as an easement so that the current property owners don't lose any of their land rights, and the easement is protecting only a portion of the land.
Yeah, there's Deschutes Land Trust. So I think that's different. So the Deschutes County in Oregon, there is a land trust which is specifically for caring for land and water to sustain Central Oregon so that local communities in the natural world can flourish together, right? It's 17,500 acres that is in Deschutes County. That's the land trust protecting land. And I think this is different, like you said, because it's the Collins family land. I don't know, but you're right. I mean, that's very different than a land trust.
Yeah, and I think they want to continue to own the land, and they don't want to put it into a trust, is probably the main difference.
Yeah, so this one is back to what I've talked about before with Mr. Trump. And there's two examples where the family has used easements to evade taxes. So the first one's a house. So in Seven Springs, Mount Kisco, New York, there's an appraisal firm, Cushman and Wakefield, where they put Seven Springs, the value of that home, at $56.5 million 2 decades, so 20 years after Trump bought it for 7.5, because they were saying, I'm going to put this easement on it for this multi-million-dollar benefit because I could build 24 houses and those 24 homes are worth X amount. So by saying, I'm going to create an easement here, I'm going to inflate the value of my property. And then if you fast forward through some interviews and you have Eric Trump saying, oh yeah, we're not going to build those 12 homes. So what's interesting is then the appraisers come in and say, there's no way that you could put 24 homes here, maybe 10. And then even with that, you're still inflating the value. But what's interesting about using an easement in this case is that you're basically creating this inflated wealth number just on this home to say it's worth 56.5 if I were to do this project. So I'm going to get this easement and make that easement worth the difference of 24 homes. It's just crazy to me that an easement could be used in this way for tax purposes or for just inflating my net worth just for this specific property.
Yeah, you think that I say talk to an attorney a lot. You need to talk to an accountant, sounds like, because, or you need both. You need a lawyer and an accountant, because if you're not taking advantage of all these laws and loopholes, you're doing it wrong. This is in New York, you said?
Yeah. And the other one is similar, where it's a golf course, but same thing. Trump Organization used an inflated valuation as part of the Trump National Golf Course in Los Angeles. and the Trump organization put 25 million value on the land it donated for a conservation easement. And then the appraisal comes back again and says this was substantially overstating the value of what was donated for the speed at which this site could be developed and all the housing requirements and all of that. So basically, they're again, well, I guess it's a few years ago now, but what's happening because of these, not just these two examples, but just the Trump organization in general, that Congress is cracking down on the abuse of these conservation easement tax breaks. So lawmakers in both parties, Republican and Democrat now, are now looking for ways to stop this overinflation on appraisals. And it's just an interesting angle on easements, but we can come back now to what you wanted to talk about. I wanted to make sure that we talked about that because this to me is the negative piece of it, where now we have easements showing up on these massive properties for people to get tax breaks where, yes, it's protecting the land where we're not going to be producing and building new homes, but now I'm using it in a way to inflate this valuation, saying here's an easement for $20 million because I'm not going to do this project. So now it's worth $20 million to me. I mean, that's ridiculous. But
if somebody was in my office and they were talking about this, or they're asking, how can I maximize return on this? It's all lawful. So long as you're playing within the confines of the rules, I don't think that there's any issue. I mean, we can get into moral or ethical type dilemmas, but there's a difference between what's right and what's lawful, which I tell people a lot. But anyway.
Ooh, that'd be fun to talk about. Let's do that another time. But come back to easements.
So I want to talk just briefly about abandonment. And generally, abandonment of an easement occurs only when an easement holder manifests the intent to relinquish the servitude by affirmative conduct. And in general, one of the questions that I get is about how we figure out whether an easement on the land actually exists. The easiest way is usually when you're buying a piece of property, you'll get a title report, and the title report should show all the easements of record. But in general, if you don't remember what it said, or you're trying to investigate something before you buy it and you don't yet have a title report, the most efficient way to vet out easements is to have a local real property lawyer in the county where the land is situated investigate chain of title and other instruments pertaining to the parcel that are public record. So what would it be without a show where I'm telling people at the end, if you have more questions about easements, talk to an attorney?
Well, not just an attorney, but a property attorney in the specific location where your land exists.
Yes, real property attorney in the county where that land is situated is going to be able to do the best investigation.
One thing we didn't really talk about, can you go to the county and how do you find easement information on a property? Just look it up in the county search website, or are there other ways to look it up, see if a property has easement information on it? Or is that even public information?
Yeah, it is public. Yes, it has to be public. Okay. Otherwise, how else would you know? So there's different ways that people can put you on notice of an easement that we talk about in contract law. There's constructive notice, there's actual notice. Constructive notice meaning that you should know, or that there's been something filed. You know, there's like a records notice. So what I was saying was, if you're trying to figure out whether or not an easement exists on your land, you can get a title report, and that title report would show all of the easements of record. And if it's not an easement of record, then is it really an easement? And that the other way to find out whether easements exist are to talk to that real property lawyer in your county to do an investigation. Okay. Well, this has been Ask a Lawyer. This is Blaine Cluton for Andrew McGuire. You can submit your questions on fairpunishment.org. Until next time, this session is adjourned.